Imagine Madrid in the year 1661. A big palace is lit only by candles, and everyone feels scared. Outside the queen's room where she is having her baby, the air smells like incense. The king's helpers walk quietly, looking worried. Servants rush by, quietly saying prayers like magic words. Inside a heavy wooden door, the queen screams. Then, everything goes quiet. A midwife comes out. Her hands are shaking and her apron is covered in blood. She doesn't say anything happy like, "It's a boy." Instead, she quietly says, "There's something wrong with him." Inside the room, Queen Mariana is asleep, wrapped in soft silk. Next to her is her baby boy. He will grow up to be King Charles II of Spain. But tonight, even the people who love him most don't want to look at him. The infant is limp, eerily quiet, his head grotesquely large, his tongue too swollen to fit his mouth. His jaw juts like a cliff edge. He cannot suckle. He cannot cry, and yet servants bow low. Nobles murmur prayers, because he is royal, because he is a Habsburg. But beneath the reverence, fear blooms. This child, this fragile, malformed heir, is not a blessing. He is the culmination of a dynasty that loved its bloodline more than nature itself. A lineage obsessed with purity, folding inward like a dying star. For generations, they married cousin to cousin, niece to uncle, until the family tree resembled not a branching oak, but a knotted spiral. The result, a boy born broken. They call it royal blood, as if it's sacred, but in truth, it had turned toxic, mutated by arrogance, calcified by centuries of incest. This baby is not just a boy. He is a prophecy wrapped in velvet, a curse anointed with oil, and yet the performance begins. The court celebrates. Toasts are raised. Portraits are commissioned. The illusion must live even if the boy may not. To admit the truth would be to confront a century of bad decisions. And so they lie. Lie to the people. Lie to themselves, but the whispers begin to crawl like vines through the palace halls. He's bewitched. He is punishment for our sins. God would never send a king like this. Yet they crown him anyway, because the empire has no other heir, and because the Habsburgs have woven a net so tangled, they must now live and rule within it. Spain cannot abandon its future, even when that future is a whimpering child with glassy eyes and no strength to lift his head. This is not just the story of Charles. This is the reckoning of an empire that chose blood over sanity. A curse had been born, and all of Europe would feel its weight. They gave him a crown before he could speak. As Charles II grew, so too did the weight of expectation around him, heavier than any gold siret could be. His body, like the empire he was born to inherit, was already beginning to fail. His head ballooned unnaturally, his mouth hung open, dripping constantly. The swollen tongue made words impossible. He gagged on bread, choked on milk. By the time he was 4, he had only just cut his first teeth. He learned to walk late, if you could call it walking. He shuffled, stumbled, tottered like a marionette whose strings were fraying. But Spain watched through rosa-tinted glass. They called his muteness contemplative, his delays signs of divine mystery, his erratic behavior, violence, confusion, staring at nothing, was chalked up to eccentricity. The court flattered themselves into believing the child was touched by heaven, not doomed by heredity. Yet within the palace walls, truth leaked like blood through linen. His tutors despaired. Charles could not read, could barely remember instructions. Loud noises startled him. Candle flames fascinated him. He'd traced the embroidery on his robes for hours, whispering to himself. When spoken to, he rarely responded. When corrected, he pouted, slapped, tore at his own clothes. One ambassador noted dryly, "The king is more relic than ruler." But still he ruled not in truth. His mother, Queen Mariana, did that. She whispered in his ear at court functions, signed decrees in his name, choreographed every movement of the limp boy on the throne. He became her shield, a sacred invalid behind whom she pulled the strings of power. And the performance continued. Each day, Charles was dressed in velvet and jewels, his twitching body perfumed and propped on a throne too grand for him. Portraits painted him as vibrant, strong, noble. But in reality, he was rotten in slow motion. His bed sheets were changed twice daily, not out of luxury, but necessity. He could not control his bowels. The rooms were scented with incense to mask the smell of decay. Foreign dignitaries arrived expecting a monarch. They found a ghost in golden robes. One French envoy wrote, "I do not know what horrifies me more, the king, or how convincingly they pretend he is well." At banquets, Charles drooled into his goblet. Musicians played for him as he blinked at the ceiling. The court laughed on cue, clapped when needed. The kingdom became a stage, its people actors in a tragedy too terrifying to name, and still the empire clung to the dream. Because behind the facade of ceremony and tradition was a stark reality. There was no one else, no other heir, no other plan. The dynasty had cornered itself, and Charles, feeble, confused, breaking, was the last hope of a fading sun. But hope was not enough. He wasn't a ruler. He wasn't even present. Charles had become a symbol, not a sovereign, a broken figure elevated by generations of delusion. And no one, not even his mother, could admit what they all feared most, that their king was a hollow shell. And the empire, whether it knew it or not, Guise was already dying. By his 20 eyes, Charles II was no longer just a failing king. He was an open wound at the center of the empire, one that refused to close. His body was crumbling faster than the lies surrounding him. His jaw hung slack. Drool slid constantly down his chin. His hair fell out in patches. His skin yellowed like wax held too close to flame. He stared through people now, eyes twitching, unfocused, as if searching for an exit from a skull that had become a prison. But the court had a new obsession, an heir. If Charles could produce a son, then the dynasty might still limp forward. A miracle might yet be forced from this broken vessel. So they found him a bride. She was 17, Marie-Louise of Orléans, niece to the son, King of France. A bright, lively girl full of youth and naive, led across the Pyrenees like a lamb to slaughter. On their wedding night, she was escorted to the royal bedchamber as if into a tomb. Charles was waiting, trembling, confused, already undressed. What happened next became legend, whispered behind lace fans and velvet curtains. Some said he stared at her like a painting. Others claimed he wept. One account said attendants had to be called in to explain what to do. One thing was certain. No child was conceived, not that night, not ever. Physicians were summoned, remedies prescribed, Spanish fly, crushed pearls, deer horn, and prayers. Exorcists were consulted, holy water sprinkled. Nothing helped because the truth couldn't be cured. Charles was sterile and likely impotent, damaged from within by generations of inbreeding. Marie-Louise began to waste away. Her laughter disappeared. She stopped eating, stopped smiling. Before long, she was dead, officially from intestinal blockage, unofficially from despair. She was 26. Charles was inconsolable. He pulled out tufts of his hair at her funeral, begged to sleep beside her corpse, swore she would return. But the court had no time for mourning. Spain still needed an heir. Within the year, a new bride arrived. Maria Anna of Neuburg, German, sharp-witted and chosen for one reason only. Her family was famed for prolific sons. She brought with her midwives, priests, and political expectations, but the outcome was identical. No child, no hope, no future. She too began to fade, drained by her role in the grim charade. The palace, once a fortress of ritual, now resembled a mausoleum. Portraits of Charles hung on every wall, showing a healthy monarch who had never existed. Beneath those oil-painted lies, the real Charles sat spoon-fed by servants, unable to chew, soiling himself in silence. The empire continued to dress him in gold and call it glory, but the truth was seeping in like rot beneath marble floors. Charles was not merely failing, he was collapsing from the inside out, and with him, so was Spain. By the time Charles turned 30, no one pretended he was healthy. They simply pretended he was holy. His body was degrading by the hour. His legs swelled grotesquely. His teeth loosened, then fell. He could no longer digest food. What he excreted came out black, tar-like, streaked with blood. His voice had become a low murmur of half-spoken nonsense, snatches of Latin, mumbled names of long-dead relatives, words without meaning. Still he wore the crown. Every morning servants bathed his decaying body in herbs, dressed him in velvet, and placed the Habsburg crown on his trembling head. He was sat before ministers like a living relic, a king in name, a husk in truth. The illusion had hardened into something ritualistic, something sacred, as if to acknowledge the rot was to damn the empire itself. But now desperation turned manic. The palace began to crawl with priests and exorcists. The queen, Maria Anna, demanded that Charles be investigated for signs of sorcery. His sterility was blamed not on biology, but on witchcraft. They searched his bedclothes, analyzed candle wax, examined the ashes of his first wife. One monk declared that a Moorish curse had made him barren. Another claimed Satan himself had made a nest in the royal bed. No one dared whisper the real cause, that this was not magic, but genetics, not punishment, but design. Charles was what happens when power breeds only with itself. Still they acted. They stripped him naked, poured holy water over his head, chanted in Latin, made him confess to sins he could not understand. He was fed powders, potions, relic dust, even pieces of saints' bones. None of it slowed the unraveling. By now, Charles had become a man trapped in perpetual infancy. He couldn't climb stairs, couldn't read, couldn't remember who was in the room. Yet the empire clung to him like a lifeline, because without him, there was nothing. There was no heir, no plan. The bloodline had withered to its final thread, so the courtiers kept smiling. Ministers bowed low. They flattered a ghost, kissed the ring of a man who drooled when spoken to. Behind palace doors, the queen forged signatures, issued decrees, barred anyone from seeing Charles alone. She curated his image as fiercely as a curator preserves a crumbling manuscript carefully, artificially, fearfully. And Charles, he believed it. He surrounded himself with holy tokens, slept with relics under his pillow, clutched amulets like lifelines. He asked monks to chase the demons from his bones because the alternative that he was simply the final echo of a cursed lineage was too terrifying to face. He wasn't cursed. He was the curse. By 38, Charles II was barely human. He weighed less than a child, his skin yellow and stretched, his eyes clouded with cataracts, his legs below, wand with fluid. His speech dissolved into murmurs, his memory unraveled. He no longer recognized his own reflection, though by now mirrors were hidden from him. And yet he sat the throne. He had ruled, if it could be called ruling, for nearly 4 decades, but by the end, he was little more than a body in a costume, a trembling wax figure posed for ceremony. Still, the court clung to the ritual. Because his death would bring more than mourning, it would bring chaos. There was no heir, no sons, no nephews, no cousins fit to rule. The great Habsburg dynasty, once the masters of half of Europe, had run out of blood. The vultures had long been circling. France wanted the throne. So did Austria. Courtiers schemed. Foreign agents whispered in the shadows. The queen tried to manipulate succession with forged letters and phantom alliances. Everyone feared what would come the moment Charles stopped breathing. And Charles, ever the pawn, was the last to know. In his final months, his body became a shrine to collapse. His stool turned black, foul with blood. His hair came out in clumps. His testicles withered. His heart slowed. His breath rasped. Still they dressed him in gold. Still they kissed his ring. Still they said, "Long live the king." When death came, it was quiet. He lay in his chamber beneath heavy velvet sheets, surrounded by incense and relics. His lips moved without sound. His eyes drifted. His body, long past its limits, gave one last shudder and then stopped. The room did not scream. They simply bowed their heads. They had rehearsed this moment for years. His autopsy was horrifying. The heart was black, the intestines gangrenous, the lungs filled with fluid, the testicles decayed, the body barely over 100 plows, the blood thick as oil. There was no one to bury him who bore his name, no heir to inherit his empire. With Charles, the Spanish Habsburgs died, but death did not bring peace. It brought war. The War of Spanish Succession erupted almost immediately, a European inferno that rests still. Haped borders, bankrupted treasuries, and killed hundreds of thousands. Spain became a battlefield. The Americas began to stir. The empire fractured. And Charles, he lay in beneath marble and gold in a grave more ornate than a man like him ever earned. Not remembered for conquest, not for wisdom, but for being the end. He left no victories, no legacy, only a warning that when power becomes inheritance instead of responsibility, when bloodlines matter more than competence, when rulers believe themselves untouchable, they don't just fall, they decay. Charles II did not destroy the empire. The empire destroyed itself and used him to do